You may have been asked to download a MyGovID for work to access the tax agent or business portals, or your accountant may have also asked you to install it. More and more government services will need the identification of a MyGovID as time progresses, so you will probably need it more rather than less over time. MyGovID is an app for a phone or tablet that allows you to prove who you are to government services and to unlock access to business-related departments such as the Tax Office and the Australian Business Register. Your MyGovID is part of a two-factor login process for accessing a number of government websites. It's like a fingerprint to verify who you are, and it's just like getting a text message for a verification code from a bank or accessing MyGov. By using this system, your information has greater security than if you just used a username and password. If you're a company director, you'll need a MyGovID as part of proving your identity to apply for a director ID. MyGovID is separate to MyGov. You may be able to use MyGovID to access MyGov, but you don't need it for that. The first step in the process is to download from the App Store or Google Play, depending on your device, the MyGovID app. MyGovID requires you to have an individual email address and device that is only yours. You can't share devices or email addresses because this system is one device, one person, one email address. This is the first screen you will see when you open the app. If you're an existing user, which means you've used it on a different device, click on that. Otherwise, create a new MyGovID. The next windows you'll see are introductory information about MyGovID and the information that you'll need to get started with setting up the ID. If you don't have a personal email address, you can set one up with one of the major free email providers, such as Google, Microsoft Outlook or Hotmail or any of a number of other providers. You will need two documents to prove who you are: a passport, citizenship certificate, a driver's license, immigration card, birth certificate. There are a number of documents that can be used to prove your identity. If your phone has face recognition, you can upgrade to the top level of security. However, you don't need this. Very few government websites require that level of security, and most will work with a standard or basic security level. Opening the app, you have a standard terms of use agreement, and then you need to enter your personal email address. It is best to use your own personal address and not your employer's, because if you change employers or if you want to access personal information, you'd rather not have it linked to your employer. This is your personal ID, not your employer's. Then it will send an email to the address you just gave. It will have a code which you'll then need to enter into the app. Now you need to enter a password and enter your personal details. The password needs to be secure, but if you don't use fingerprint or Face ID on your device, it needs to be easy to enter, because if you use this regularly to enter the business portal, it's much faster to just swipe your fingerprint than enter a password. Now you come to the screen for entering your proof of ID. As you can see, there are a number of identification documents that you can use. You can use the camera to scan the passport or license, or you can enter in the details manually. You can also enter in the details of your birth certificate by starting with the state, and then it will ask further questions as you go along. Other documents require enough details to prove that it's the original document and you are who you say you are. Once you've completed all these steps, your MyGovID should be ready to use. When you then log into a government website with your MyGovID, you'll get this screen. Entering the email address for your MyGovID will lead to a message being sent to the device that you set up the ID on. If you don't use Face ID or fingerprint to unlock your phone, it's best to open the MyGovID app first. Otherwise, it can time out before you have entered in your password. The first time with a new computer, it will ask you to log in to the app and enter the numbers that appear on the screen into the app. Later times, it will just ask you to log into the app and verify that the numbers showing on the device are the same as the numbers showing on the screen. Accepting that the numbers are then correct, it will then take you to the website that you were trying to get into. And that's how you set up a MyGovID.